Let's kick things off, though, with the civil service, because it's a very weird one, this, to me, because the FDA union seems to stand for a strange... It's not like, you know, other unions that have a name that you can understand. It's called the First Division Association or something like that,
I
isn't
don't
it?
know, there's some historic reason
It's some
for that.
historic reason for that.
Yeah.
And it's the union that represents the senior civil servants, and in this particular instance, in the Home Office. So we're talking about managers, we're talking about people who are probably on pretty good money, I would imagine, perhaps in excess of 6 figures. They're asking for a judicial review because they're saying that they might be in breach of international law if they enable the government to implement the Safety of Rwanda Act. Doesn't make any sense to me.
Right, there's a number of things to untangle here, isn't there? You know, you can imagine that if you work in a job and your boss told you to do something like, you know, go and burgle lots of houses.
Right, or
right,
break the law by driving at high speed or
right?
something, yeah.
But the thing about breaking international law is there isn't a police force that comes around and arrests you of international European courts, you know, police officers.
Yeah.
Right. It's a guidance to governments about an agreement that they've signed up to. It's very interesting, this, because I can't remember the First Division civil servants going up in arms when we brought in the online safety bill.
No.
Which actually was an affront to international law on free speech and free expression.
Right.
But somehow they actually ignored that. In other words, this is entirely political.
Of course it is.
It's part and parcel of the use and abuse of the law. The use and abuse, actually, even of the notion of international law, to undermine sovereign decision-making, that's been made by Parliament.
Right.
Listeners will know that I'm not a great fan of the Rwanda plan because I always thought it was a bit of a bonkers one. But it was agreed on by elected politicians.
Exactly. And they
the job of civil servants is to enact what they say.
And it's very clear that the Home Office, as we've been saying for many years, ever since it was said by John Reid, the Home Office is not fit for purpose. I mean, only 2 days ago, we were reporting on the story that they seem to have lost track of about 3,500 migrants who they were supposed to be letting know that they might be sending to Rwanda, and now we're still looking for them. So what about that as a dereliction of duty?
I think that there's been, in general, almost a willful, I mean, I think we can say, a willful refusal
no doubt.
to take any notice of any of the instructions around asylum seeking. There's been a presumption that this is a xenophobic, nasty, conservative government, and that they know best.
Yes.
And the main thing, you know, from a legal point of view, is the European Court of Human Rights does not have a police force, does not have prisons, does not have the right to police what happens in any sovereign state. And this will be any of them,
And also, it doesn't have the right to make law, does it?
No. What it does is it has a set of, well, it's the guidance as what you can do. We sign on to it. But as I say, there's whole swathes of it that actually we push the line on. In other words, lots of countries who are signed up to the ECHR are breaking things on privacy all the time. I mean, we've had a government that's been spying on people.
Yes.
Right? Guess who's been doing the spying? People from senior civil service have been keeping tabs on, oh, this person's guilty of disinformation in those disinformation units. Have they been reporting themselves to the ECHR for breaching the privacy rights which everybody has under them?
And also, we've been saying for months and possibly years that, you know, lots of countries in Europe ignore the ECHR whenever they feel like doing it. The French have ignored them in the past, the Germans have ignored them. You know, they're all deporting refugees now because they've realised that there's too many of them in the country that they're running. So the ECHR doesn't really have any power. They are the kind of the place of last resort, I suppose, for lefty lawyers.
I mean, you can go to court, but it's just that this notion that they're saying is, oh, we can't be asked to break the law, is just playing fast and loose with the concept of what the law is in this instance.
I mean, it says here in the Telegraph, it's on page 1 of the Telegraph, if the union is successful with its legal challenge, it could force the government to hold a parliamentary vote to specify in law that the UK will ignore injunctions that they might be putting on, or amend the Civil Service Code. Here's another one. The Civil Service Code also isn't law, is it?
No, well, also, they've been breaching it. I mean, there's so many leaks coming out of the civil service. You know, they've been breaching their own code for a very long time, right? The problem with the civil service at the moment is it's become a politicised. I don't mean every civil servant, for anyone who's listening, is all right, but it's become a highly politicised force. And we know from exactly these people who are making a fuss now that they were the ones who we heard only recently were in floods of tears the day after the Brexit vote. And this, by the way, was said in breach of the duty by a lord who had been running the civil service, who explained, oh, well, I felt I had to go in and assure them that I'd also voted to remain, and that somehow we'd get through. These are the civil servants.
And
no wonder that Brexit was thwarted at every corner.
And no wonder it was so difficult for Brexit to become a reality, because these people continue to throw roadblocks in the way of everything.
I actually asked people why we weren't prepared, lots of the things that technically needed to be done. And they said because nobody in the civil service believed that people would vote to leave.
That it would happen, right.
So they didn't do any of the preparation, which they were meant to as civil servants.
Right.
Say we decide to leave, they just ignored it.
They
won't do it. No,
it's hard to believe, isn't it? Front pages have all got some version, of course, or other, of the pictures of little Daniel Anjorin, who was unfortunately killed by that man, the maniac with the sword, at age 14. And we can't obviously go into too much. He's now been named. He's now been charged. It turns out that he was a national of I think Spanish and Brazilian citizenship. Nobody quite knows why still he went on the rampage, but as I say, we should pay tribute to this little boy who apparently was son of a teacher, very successful kid at school.
I think
horrific,
why it's so tragic is because we've seen all these kind of like knife crime stories, and there's something horrible going on, and with kids, stabbing each other and so on. In this instance, what's so heartbreaking is this is a completely innocent child who's been stabbed, but in a very different kind of incident.
Yes, indeed.
And what he represents, I suppose, was the very best, Daniel, of multi-ethnic Britain, which is a young black kid whose family had worked so hard to get him successfully into that wonderful school, and he was a thriving scholar. That's what they all say. Beautiful young boy. Struck down.
I know, just awful. And even more ridiculously, yesterday there was yet another case in Sheffield, and there's a 17-year-old who's currently been charged with attempted murder. 3 more kids stabbed. I mean, it seems to be happening everywhere.
So this Daniel story is not that, but the youth on youth violence. Is really something that needs to be tackled, isn't it?
Anyway, it really is. Going back to the immigration route, the Telegraph's main story is about Ireland, and this has sort of made quite a few people have a wry smile, hasn't it? Because the Irish, as you well know,
laughing.
Guffawing, perhaps I should say, the Irish who were so desperate to tell us why they didn't want to have a border because of Brexit between Northern Ireland and the Republic, are now desperately wanting to have a border. They're now sending cops to go and actually man the border.
Well, one of the things that we should all note, because it doesn't get enough attention, is the issue of immigration is really blown up as a massive political crisis in Ireland, in Southern Ireland.
Right.
I mean, my family are from Ireland, and everybody's talking about this because they feel, like people in lots of countries, like in the UK, that they can't cope and they're not being consulted. Ordinary people feel very bitter.
And they're suddenly seeing
in their small
changes,
towns,
right?
Suddenly there's lots of people coming in, hotels been taken over. So guess what? The government have now said, well, the immigrants are all coming from the UK. They're going over that border. Send the cops up. Don't let them in. Have a hard border.
And now they want to send them back.
I know. Sammy Wilson made the point that he's really worried. There's going to be coach loads of people who are going to be dropped off. One of the things that I love about this story is the UK a safe country to send those migrants back to, if they will, or asylum seekers back to, if they'll then go on to Rwanda, because Ireland has said that the Rwanda scheme is unsafe.
That's a very good point.
Breaks international law. So which way? I mean,
I came up with a brilliant plan on Monday. I said, here's what we do in order to not only upset the Irish, but also to sort of prove the EU to be a completely ridiculous construct. Is we can send, instead of sending these migrants to Rwanda, send them to Stranraer, put them on a ferry. You can get a car with 4 people in it for 130 quid. Send them all over to Belfast and let them drive down.
I think
it's a great plan.
I think that Ireland causing this fuss might have created an alternative strategy for the government.
I think so.
But now that you realise how easy it is, one thing to say is, I mean, the worst thing about this is, and we're having this conversation about the asylum seekers, half of them, we don't know who all of them are. We know that they're not fleeing wars and famine. But on the other hand, they're probably, decent enough people trying to get a better life. And they're being shunted from pillar to post, political footballs, because they are being used by the people who are making huge amounts of money out of them, and then exploited by the kind of lawyers and liberals who use them as a political football to show their virtue. And in the meantime,
Because
they
the
could end up
lefties,
anywhere.
they don't know what to do. I mean, the Labour Party came out last night and said, of course, if we won't do away with the Rwanda scheme altogether, but what we will do is we'll extend the ability for people who came here since the law was put in, they will all be able to apply to stay here as well.